If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, you've probably spent a lot of time asking yourself one question: what happened to me? Maybe the most confusing part is this: you can still get an erection when you're by yourself, but not when you're with the woman that you love. If that's happened to you, you're certainly not alone. And today I want to explain why that happens from the perspective of your brain. Like most men, you've probably started by looking at your body. Maybe you've wondered if it's your testosterone, perhaps it's dropping, or maybe you're simply getting older, or maybe stress has finally caught up with you. You may have spent late nights searching online, trying all different kinds of supplements, or hoping that someone could explain why something that once felt so completely natural has now become so uncertain. Obviously, the physical changes are frustrating enough, but what often hurts even more is what happens before intimacy ever begins. Instead of feeling excited to connect with your partner, your mind starts racing ahead. You begin wondering whether your body is going to cooperate or not. Rather than being present in the moment, you're evaluating yourself. You're preemptively monitoring your performance, and you're hoping that nothing goes wrong. What should feel like connection slowly starts feeling like a test. This video is brought to you by my HarperCollins published book, Mind Over Explicit Matter. If you're ready to quit porn and reclaim your life mentally and physically, go over to drtrishleigh.com/book. Hi, I'm Dr. Trish Leigh, a cognitive neuroscientist, and for more than 20 years, I've studied how repeated behaviors physically and functionally change the brain. After looking at thousands of brain maps and working with men all over the world, I've learned something very important that surprises almost every single man that I meet. Erectile dysfunction does not always begin where most people think that it does. Long before your body ever responds, it's your brain that has already decided whether the experience in front of you is something worth pursuing or not, if it's something that your brain wants to pursue. Healthy desire begins in the brain. Your brain creates anticipation, it generates motivation, and it prepares your body to respond. When that system is functioning well, everything downstream works better. When it isn't, the problem may have started years before the erection was ever missed. That's exactly what I want to help you understand today. To understand what's happening, we have to take a step back and look at something much bigger than sex. We have to understand the brain's reward system. Most people have heard dopamine described as the pleasure chemical, but that's only a small part of its story. Dopamine is truly the neurochemical that helps your brain decide what deserves your attention. Fundamentally, it's the signal that says, this matters, move toward this, pursue this. Healthy desire depends on that system working the way it was designed to work. The challenge is that your brain doesn't become wired by what you value the most. It becomes wired by what you repeatedly practice. Think about the world we live in today. From the moment you wake up until the moment that you go to bed, your attention is constantly being pulled in 100 different directions. Social media, notifications, short videos, sports highlights, gaming, breaking news, artificial intelligence, yes, pornography proper, sexualized social media, one novel experience after another, arriving faster than any human brain evolved to process. Your brain isn't making moral judgments about any of this. It's simply doing what healthy brains have always done. It's adapting to the environment that you repeatedly place it in. Over time, that repeated exposure begins changing what captures your attention and what your reward system starts expecting. The brain gradually becomes accustomed to faster rewards, stronger stimulation, and constant novelty. I call this the dopamine hijack because your reward system slowly begins chasing the next hit of stimulation without you ever consciously deciding that's what you want. What's fascinating is that this process rarely begins in the bedroom. It usually begins everywhere else. Most people never recognize this shift while it's happening because it doesn't arrive all at once. Nothing dramatic changes overnight. Life simply becomes a little louder. You find yourself reaching for your phone every time there's a quiet moment without even realizing that you've done it. Sitting through a movie becomes more difficult than it used to be. Driving somewhere without a podcast suddenly feels strangely uncomfortable. Even standing in line for a few minutes seems like wasted time unless you're looking at a screen. None of those moments seem important in their own way, in any particular way. But this is exactly why this goes so unnoticed. Because one day, something happens that finally does get your attention. The woman you love walks into the room, and instead of feeling naturally your attention moving toward her, the moment feels strangely flat. That's often when fear takes over. Your mind immediately begins searching for explanations. Maybe I've fallen out of love. Maybe I'm not attracted to her anymore. Perhaps something is permanently wrong with me. In my experience, that's rarely where the story begins. More often, your brain has simply spent years becoming exceptionally good at responding to something else. One of the most important things that I've learned as a neuroscientist is that desire isn't simply a feeling you either have or you don't have. Desire is something your brain learns through repetition. Every repeated action strengthens a pathway. Every repeated choice teaches your reward system where to look for satisfaction. So without realizing it, your brain can slowly become more responsive to high-level artificial stimulation while becoming less responsive to the real-life experiences that really matter the most to you. That's what I call a desire miswire. But, of course, there's encouraging news. The same neuroplasticity that allowed your brain to learn the pattern that your brain is working in right now also gives it the ability to learn a healthier one. One of the first questions I ask almost every man who comes to see me has nothing to do with erections. I simply ask, what has your brain been practicing? That question changes the entire conversation because your brain doesn't become who you hope you want to be. It becomes exceptionally good at whatever you repeatedly ask it to do. That's what I want you to remember. A few months ago, I met with a gentleman over Zoom who scheduled an appointment because he was convinced that he had erectile dysfunction, an organic problem. Within the first few minutes of talking with him, I realized the erection wasn't actually the part of his story that concerned me the most. He looked at me and he said this, "Dr. Trish, it's not that I can't have sex, it's that I don't really want to." Then he paused before saying something I'll never forget. "I love my wife. She's beautiful. She's my best friend. But when she reaches for my hand or initiates intimacy, sometimes it feels like one more thing to do on my to-do list." He also said, sometimes he prefers to become aroused by himself. You could hear the sadness in his voice because he wasn't trying to reject his wife. He wasn't looking for someone else in the world. He missed her. More than that, he missed the version of himself who couldn't wait to be close to her. That's when I gently asked him the same question that I'm asking you here today. What has your brain been practicing? Because once we understand what the brain has been practicing, then, and only then, we can finally begin teaching it something new. As we continued talking, I found myself becoming much less interested in what was happening in the bedroom and much more interested in what was happening throughout the rest of his day. I asked him to describe an ordinary evening after work. He told me he usually came home mentally exhausted, but instead of allowing his brain the opportunity to slow down, he immediately looked for something else to capture his attention. Sometimes it was scrolling through his phone. Other evenings, it was sports highlights or YouTube videos, the news, or pornography. The specific activity wasn't really the point. What mattered was that his brain had become very efficient at moving away from quiet moments and toward immediate stimulation, and then sometimes even higher stimulation, like in the case of pornography. He wasn't making those choices because he was trying to damage his relationship. In fact, he loved his wife deeply. His brain had simply learned that whenever there was boredom, stress, fatigue, or even a few unstructured minutes, the fastest path to feeling better was another source of stimulation. One of the questions I hear almost every single week is this: Dr. Trish, if I can still get an erection when I masturbate, why am I struggling when I'm with my wife? I think that's one of the most important questions a man can ask because it tells us something profound about what his brain has learned. An erection during masturbation doesn't necessarily mean your reward system is functioning the way that's supposed to optimally. It may simply mean your brain has become highly practiced at responding to a very specific pattern of stimulation. If masturbation is repeatedly paired with pornography, endless novelty, multiple tabs, or rushing toward orgasm as quickly as possible, or taking as much time as possible, your reward system begins learning that environment is the important one, the one of pursuit, through repetition. Over time, your brain becomes increasingly efficient at responding to that familiar pattern while finding the slower pace, the emotional connection, and the natural unpredictability of real intimacy much more difficult to respond to. This isn't about saying that masturbation itself is inherently harmful. The more important question is always, what has your brain been practicing? The brain doesn't judge. It learns. When masturbation consistently reinforces artificial stimulation instead of real connection, your reward system gradually begins expecting that pattern. That's another way a desire miswire develops. It also explains why so many men tell me this: everything works when I'm by myself, but when I'm with a partner or a woman that I really want to be with, a woman I love, everything changes. Once you understand that your brain has been practicing one pattern over and over again, you can begin teaching it a healthier one. One of the reasons I'm so optimistic about helping people recover is because the science increasingly supports what many of us have been seeing clinically for years. Researchers using functional MRI have identified measurable differences in brain networks involved in very important aspects of arousal, like reward, motivation, and sexual arousal when comparing men experiencing psychological erectile dysfunction with healthy controls. These findings reinforce something I've believed and seen throughout my entire career. Healthy sexual function isn't simply about what happens below the neck. Blood flow matters, of course, and hormones matter. Medical conditions absolutely exist, and every man experiencing erectile dysfunction deserves a thorough medical evaluation to rule out these physical causes. But at the same time, we can't ignore the organ that's responsible for creating desire in the first place. For me, that's one of the most encouraging messages in neuroscience. The brain is constantly adapting to the experiences we repeatedly give it. That's what neuroplasticity means. Your brain isn't fixed. It isn't permanently wired one way or another. It's responding to the life you have been living. If years of repeated stimulation gradually misshaped your reward system, then years of healthier experiences in front of you can reshape it again. The same capacity that allowed the brain to become miswired is the very capacity that can allow it to recover, to rewire. After looking at thousands of brain maps over the past 2 decades, I've noticed another pattern that shows up over and over again. Many of the men I work with aren't simply struggling with desire. They're living with brains that have forgotten how to rest. Maybe you've had this experience. From the time you wake up in the morning until you finally fall asleep at night, your attention is constantly being pulled somewhere else. There's always another notification to answer, another problem to solve, another email to read, another video to watch, another headline demanding your attention. I call this the strained brain pattern. A strained brain spends so much time scanning for the next thing that it struggles to settle into the present moment. The challenge is that no brain can sustain that pace, that constancy forever. Eventually, the system begins compensating. Energy drops, motivation fades, focus becomes much more difficult. Joy, the essence of life, in my opinion, becomes quieter, harder to find. Desire often follows the same pattern because the reward system has spent so long chasing stimulation that it no longer responds as easily to the slower, quieter experiences that make real life meaningful. That's what I call the drained brain pattern. One of my clients has said something that has stayed with me for years. He looked at me and said, "I don't think I know how to be present anymore." I remember smiling back at him because from a neuroscience perspective, he had just described the problem perfectly. Presence isn't simply a personality trait. It is a brain state. And like every other brain state, it becomes stronger with practice. The more often you train your brain to slow down, focus on one thing, and fully engage with the person standing in front of you, the more natural that way of living becomes. Your brain always remembers what it practices, which means if you've unintentionally practiced distraction, you can intentionally begin practicing presence. If you've been listening to me and recognizing yourself in what I say, I want to leave you with something much more powerful than information. I want to leave you with what I call pragmatic hope. One of the greatest discoveries in neuroscience is that your brain is changing throughout your entire life. It isn't fixed at 25 or 45 or even 65 years old. Every single experience you repeat strengthens certain neural pathways while allowing others to become weaker. That's how we learn new skills. It's how habits become automatic. It's how musicians learn an instrument, how athletes develop muscle memory, and how children learn language. Your brain is always adapting to what you repeatedly ask it to do. So when you begin looking at erectile dysfunction through that lens, the conversation changes completely. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you begin asking, "What has my brain been learning?" That's a much more powerful and hopeful question because learning can always continue. The reward system that gradually became conditioned to seek faster, more intense stimulation isn't broken. It's been adapting exactly the way a healthy brain is designed to adapt. The exciting part is that neuroplasticity works in both directions. It can be your best friend or your worst enemy. If your brain learned through one pattern of repetition, in fact, it can learn a healthier pattern through repetition as well. That's why I never want people leaving Zooms believing they're stuck. I want them understanding that their brain has simply been practicing something that no longer serves the life that they want and they deserve to live. Neuroplasticity doesn't depend on willpower. It depends on repetition. The opportunity to begin rewiring your brain actually shows up many times throughout an ordinary day, usually in moments that seem completely insignificant to you. You finish a difficult meeting. You feel bored for a few minutes. You're sitting alone in your car before walking into your house. You're standing in line waiting for your coffee. Without thinking, your brain automatically begins to look for stimulation because that's the pattern it has practiced thousands of times before. I would love for you to become curious about those moments instead of simply moving through them. Before your hand reaches for your phone, before you open another app, before you automatically distract yourself, there's a brief but incredibly powerful moment when your brain hasn't yet committed to the old habit yet. I call that the Rewire Window. It's only a few seconds long. It's one of the most important moments in this entire process because your brain is incredibly teachable during that brief pause. Instead of following the old pathway, you, in fact, can choose to move towards something in your real life. Walk outside for a few minutes, call your honey, toss a ball to your child, get present, stay engaged, walk your dog like I walk Chewy, read a chapter of a book. Sit quietly with your coffee and enjoy the stillness. Those choices may not feel as exciting at first because your reward system has been conditioned to expect something louder. But that's okay. You're not trying to create instant gratification in those moments. You're teaching your brain that your real life deserves your attention again. And every time you repeat that choice, you're strengthening the healthier pathways. I call that the instant rewire. You can use it in that rewire window. For many people, those daily changes begin creating meaningful momentum. But for other people who have spent years, sometimes decades, reinforcing those old, same neural pathways, that's when having more information about the brain actually can make an enormous difference. I often compare it to improving your golf swing. As you know, the Hubs is an avid golfer. You could keep guessing why your swing isn't producing the results that you want. Or you could watch it. You could identify exactly what's happening, and you could build a plan based on objective information rather than on trial and error, which we all know takes longer and can be ineffective. The brain deserves that same level of precision. That's why I love and use quantitative EEG brain mapping in my practice. A QEEG brain map allows us to measure patterns of brain activity, so we're no longer guessing about how your brain is functioning. Instead, we can see whether the networks involved in attention, self-regulation, and the reward system are functioning efficiently, or instead, whether they've become dysregulated or dysfunctional over time. Once we understand those patterns, those underlying core patterns you can't see without a brain map, then we can develop a personalized plan based on the way that your brain is actually functioning and working. For many of the people I work with, that plan also includes neuromodulation technology, brain-changing technology that's designed to encourage healthier brain activity through repeated training. It doesn't put anything into your brain. The goal isn't simply to improve one symptom. The goal is to help your brain function more efficiently overall. Because when your brain becomes healthier, guess what? Every area of your life has the opportunity to improve alongside it. One of my favorite parts of this work is watching people discover that recovery is so much bigger than they imagined. Most men initially come in hopes that they'll regain reliable erections. And of course, I totally understand that. What often surprises them is that the first signs of healing usually have very little to do with erections. They begin telling me they're enjoying conversations again, that they aren't reaching for their phone every few minutes, that throughout their workday, they're looking forward to spending time with their family. They find themselves laughing more, noticing more, and feeling more present and engaged in their everyday lives. That's the spice of life, my friend. Something else begins changing as well. Many men tell me they no longer feel that same automatic pull toward masturbation whenever they're stressed, bored, lonely, or overwhelmed. Instead of using sexual stimulation as an escape from uncomfortable emotions, they begin recognizing those moments as opportunities. One of my favorite words, opportunities to reconnect with real life. That's a significant shift because it tells me that the reward system is changing. Their brain is no longer automatically looking for the fastest, highest source of dopamine. It's beginning to find satisfaction in genuine connection, meaningful accomplishment that isn't instant gratification, it's delayed gratification, and of course, emotionally connected intimacy. One gentleman shared a story with me that I've never forgotten. He told me his wife was standing in the kitchen making dinner one evening, and he caught himself simply watching her. There wasn't a special occasion. She wasn't dressed up. Nothing extraordinary was happening. Then he smiled and he said, "Dr. Trish, I suddenly realized how beautiful she is. I hadn't had that thought in many years." That moment had nothing to do with his sexual performance. It had everything to do with his desire and attention. His brain had stopped chasing constant stimulation long enough to recognize the woman in front of him that he had loved all along and desired. That's what rewiring really looks like. Your brain begins noticing what has always mattered to you instead of constantly searching for something new. When your attention changes, desire naturally begins changing with it because your reward system is finally remembering where it was designed to find fulfillment. Before we finish today, I want to give you something practical, pragmatic to work on this week because lasting change does not happen through information alone. It happens through practice. Over the next 7 days, I want you to begin noticing what I've been calling the Rewire Window. That's the brief moment between an urge and a habit. It's the instant, that rewire instant, your brain reaches for stimulation before you've actually acted on it. Most people move through that moment so quickly they never even realize that it exists. They pick up their phone, they open the app, they turn on the television, or they begin scrolling without a single conscious thought. I want you to slow that moment down. That, my friend, is your rewire instant. The next time you notice your hand reaching for your phone, pause just for a second, feel the instant. Take one slow breath and ask yourself a simple question. What do I actually want right now? You may discover that what you're really looking for isn't another screen at all. Maybe you're looking for a break. Maybe you're looking for connection, or you just need a few minutes to rest and chill. Whatever the answer is, choose one small action that moves you toward your real life instead of away from it. Remember your goals. Walk outside for a few minutes to be present. Sit on your porch with a cup of coffee, one of my favorite things to do. Call your spouse. Throw a ball with your kiddo. Pet your dog, right? Stretch. Pray, reflect, read a few pages of your book. The specific activity matters much less, but it should be individualized. It's the decision itself that's important, though, because every time you choose your real life over artificial stimulation, in fact, you're teaching your brain the healthier pattern. And of course, the more times you repeat it, the better. The small decisions may not seem significant in that moment, but that's the rewire window. That's the rewire instant. But repeated often enough, they become the foundation of lasting change. If there's one thing I hope you'll take away from today's conversation, it's this. Your brain is not broken. Your brain has been learning. Every experience you've repeated has been teaching your reward system what to notice, what to pursue, and ultimately what to desire. That's how a reward system becomes hijacked, and that's how desire becomes miswired. The beautiful part is that the same neuroplasticity that allows your brain to learn those patterns can, in fact, allow your brain to learn healthier ones. You are not trapped by your past, and you are certainly not defined by the habits that you've practiced. Your brain is adapting every single moment of every single day, which means every decision you make today is helping to shape the brain that you'll have tomorrow. So begin by paying attention to the ordinary moments in your life, because those are the moments that quietly transform your brain. Every time you choose a conversation instead of another scroll, every time you look into your honey's eyes instead of down at your screen, every time you step outside, move your body, and pursue your purpose or fully engage with the people that you love, you are in fact strengthening those healthier neural pathways. I know that those choices may seem small, but your brain doesn't measure these moments by how dramatic they are. It measures them by how often you repeat them. Over time, those repeated choices become habits. Those habits become patterns, and those patterns become the way that your brain naturally functions. Okay, so if you found value in what I'm saying here today, I would love for you to go over to drtrishleigh.com. I've rebuilt some web pages there so I can help you understand what a desire rewire is. I've also created new programs to help you be able to move into a rewire and accomplish your goals. Remember, with enough repetition, your brain can remember what it desires. So go over to Dr. Trish Leigh so that you can learn how your brain has been hijacked, how it became miswired, and how you can intentionally rewire it. My mission has never been simply to help people overcome one symptom. My mission is to help you build a healthier brain, because when your brain begins functioning the way that it was designed to, then you get the life that you want and you deserve. All right, until next time, remember, control your brain or it will control you. I'll see you then.